Yo,
Hello, hello.
hey, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Great. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. I was having a hard time connecting with you.
Yeah, same. I'm not the best at Instagram, so it's
This
nice
is
to
my
have.
this is my first time doing that. I want to thank you for doing this with me, and I apologize for taking your time. And I really appreciate you being here with me. And try to do this interview about astrology, and and yeah, tell me about yourself. For those who are viewing and seeing this live, uh, Emmett and I we met at my first yoga teacher retreat in Quito, Ecuador, and we were doing a tantra course. He was one of my next door roommate when we lived in a shack for a month, and he was his focus was in astrology, and that was the first time. Well, I would say second time, because the first time I ever heard about astrology was with when I was a child, when I was you ever heard of this guy, Walter Mercado?
I have not.
He
Sounds like a very intelligent name,
All
though.
right, Walter Mercado was a astrologer, an astrologist. I believe that's the correct word. He was a
Astrologer, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, astrologer, and he was he was very big in the '90s, and he every time he would appear at the news at 5:30 in the morning, I mean 5:30 in the afternoon, and at 5:30 in the afternoon, everybody, the whole Spanish community, every Spanish people will sit down in front of the TV to read. He would read everybody horoscope on that day, every day, and so at 5:30, everybody would just go and he would read everybody horoscope, and you know. God forbid they missed their horoscope, they would be so upset for that day. So, and so that's how I came to know what an astrologer is, through him.
Cool.
And so you actually are the second person I come across, um, no, who knows about astrology. And I do remember the first day, I think the first day or the second day you sat me down and you tried to read my my sign and my what is it, my chart, my birth chart, and I had no idea what was going on. But then again, this was my first yoga teacher experience,
Yeah.
and I that was the first time a lot of things opened up in my eye. Like I started noticing a lot of things. Then what is yoga other than asanas? So, but yeah. So, Emmett, please introduce yourself and tell me about yourself. How did you get into this journey of astrology and stuff like that? So,
Yeah, of course. So I remember too, I remember looking at your chart, and I think your moon was in Scorpio. Does that ring a bell or
I
something along
some
those?
yeah, something like that. A Scorpio, something
Yeah.
along, and I
And then
still
I asked you if you were a fighter or something like that, right? And then you were
right,
like that you used to do martial arts or something like that, right?
right.
Cool. Yeah, that was a fun reading for sure. But yeah, so basically, I got into astrology kind of by fate, in the sense that I had got a job on a tour boat, and the tour boat owner approached me and he asked me if I was a Pisces or a Leo, and I said that I wasn't. And he said, "Oh, that's interesting. I think I have someone that would want to meet you." So then a week later, the owner came back and he introduced me to his roommate, who was an astrologer. And the astrologer was like, "Hey, if you'd like, I can read your chart." I said, "Sure." So he read my chart, and at the end of it, I was just flabbergasted. I had just retired from electrical engineering in some way, that I was letting go of my career and was looking for kind of the next step and just working fun jobs. And then the astrologer approached me and he said things that I'm like, how can he know this from looking at my chart? Like, it made no sense to me that he could tell that I was a child of divorce, as an example, from looking at my chart. So then I'm like, okay, there's something to this. And then at the end of the reading, he said, and based on your chart, you can be an astrologer. I'm like, okay, cool. And he said, would you like me to teach you? I said, I don't necessarily have money or the time for that. He says, no. Like, it's an apprenticeship. This is your commitment is what's what's required here rather than a financial reward. And at the end of it, because of the amount of time we spent together, we spent every 2 Sundays together for 8 hours, kind of for 2 years, going through astrology and learning how it worked. And he had a PhD in astrology from St. Petersburg University in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a Russian trained astrologer. And yeah, he taught me for a couple of years, and yeah, and since then I've kind of followed other masters and other teachers, and so it's been about 7 years, 8 years now that I've been on the journey of astrology, and yeah, now I'm at the point that I am doing it professionally and helping people go through transformation periods or helping people get to know themselves through astrology, really to get to see what the beauty is in your soul and your chart, and how to use that and how to bring that to the world is kind of how I approach astrology.
Right.
Yeah.
I find it very interesting because like I said, the first time you read my chart, I was like, is he like really kidding? Is it really real? Like I was in doubt, but then over time it just starts sinking in, and I start believing like, yeah, he's sort of right. He's right. It's like hard to admit. So I just find that very fascinating. So for people who's like joining in and or joining in later, can you tell them like what is astrology? Can you describe it for those who never heard of it or don't know what it is?
Yeah, gladly. So astrology is the observation of the sky and the planets and the moon and the sun, and we put it in relation to humans, to people, to events, to what happens on the earth. So basically, whenever you open up an astrology chart, it's opening up a moment in time and a place. And that place and that time is going to have a certain energy signature. So the astrology chart is the written version of the energetic signature that's currently going on at that time and place. So let's say you're born in London, UK at 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, then that means that the sun is probably rising at that time. It's just on the horizon. So the effect that the sun would have if it's just on the horizon when you're waking up would mean that you're probably a morning person. So people that are born in the morning would typically have more of a tendency to be waking up early in the morning, because when they first came into the world, that's what they were exposed to. So the human body just kind of naturally learns that, oh, this is the energy that's home. This is what's natural. So the birth chart is just a picture of a moment in time and place that shows you where the planets are, where the sun is, where the moon is. And the idea is that that's your natural state. That's your original blueprint of who you are.
All right. Back to the chart. When you were reading my chart, I remember I quite did not get the exact timing of my day birth, and you said to me, I had to get it on point or else it throws you off of your reading.
Yeah.
Correct. So
yeah.
Yeah, and I still haven't checked. I still haven't confirmed yet the timing, but I believe I'm not going to doubt myself, but I do believe that the time that you read it, it was the time that I was born. So which I was, yeah, I believe it was like I believe I said 3 o'clock or something like that in the morning. So
possibly, I do think that you were a night chart,
yeah,
so more of a night owl kind of person. So that 3 a.m. would make sense
right,
for me still.
right.
But yeah, it's definitely, it is important to have the birth time, especially when you're looking at horoscopes as an example, because the horoscope that you're supposed to follow is not your sun sign. It's not the day that you're born on. The horoscope you're supposed to follow is actually your ascending sign. And the ascending sign is dependent on the time that you were born. So that's why it's important to have the time of birth, because that's how a horoscope will actually apply to you, because you're supposed to follow your ascending sign rather than your sun sign or your moon sign. Now, since we've met, I've learned a new technique called rectification, which is basically being able to find someone's birth time. So what we can do is we can go at specific points throughout your life. Like if you broke your arm at some point, or if you won like $100 or something. So we'll go through 20 points in your life, and when we go through those points, we can kind of see if it aligns with what the chart is saying with the event that happened. So if you broke your arm on March 1st, 1999, as an example, well, we would go to March 1st, 1999, and see if Mars was transiting that day, as an example, if Mars had an effect on your chart, because Mars is the planet of accidents. So whenever Mars gets activated in your chart in some way, there's a chance of an accident that can happen to you. So by doing rectification, you can kind of see, oh, well, the birth time is right, because by looking at the rest of your chart, we can see how it aligns with Mars. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I find that very
Cool.
interesting and wild. Like,
Yeah, yes. Same. Yeah. I'm still amazed, like every time that like I say something and like I don't know why I'm saying this, but I feel it applies, and then someone will see it and then I'll say it and the person is like, I've never told anyone that, or it's impossible that you know that. And I'm like, I don't really know it. I'm just reading the chart at the end of the day. So yeah, it is a pretty magical science or technique when it comes to being able to see what's going on. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, it still blows my mind. Yeah, every time, every reading's its own new experience.
And
So
it is funny that, over time, like the more you get into it, the deeper you get, the more like little tricks you find, than, on your own,
yeah,
than going through school and like for me practicing tantra yoga on my own, it's like I didn't believe the fact that they would say they said, try it out, experience, through your experience you understand. And little by little, when I was living in Ecuador and I would practice every day, like I started understanding a little bit more of the meaning of tantra, the significance of tantra. So applying to your astrology, it's just, over the time, the more you practice, the more you like it reveals itself. The astrology, the techniques and the trick reveals itself. It's like kind of speaks to you and opens a whole new like world or ideas. And I find that just very interesting in both tantra and in astrology as well too. Of learning. So so yeah. What are the fundamental principle? What are the fundamental principle of or beliefs that underlie astrology?
what do you mean?
What are the fundamental principle of astrology?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. So yeah, as Jose said earlier, we met through going through a tantra yoga school in Ecuador, and yeah, like like tantra, like astrology, there are basic principles of what's important to pay attention to, and in astrology, it's really that everything affects you. Everything has an aspect of meaning. Everything has an aspect that's coming from somewhere. Like as much as you think things are random, there is a pattern somewhere that applies. And astrology is an art of discovering patterns based on who you are through your birth chart and other charts that can be looked at. Uh, it's consistent in its rule set. So if Neptune, as an example, is on the lower side of your chart,
hold on,
well, that would mean that you might have
Emma.
hidden relationships.
Apologize.
Yeah.
You kind of broke off for the last like minute. You were breaking
Oh.
up. You were yeah. So would you mind taking it back?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, and the principles of astrology is that the rules are kind of consistent. What you're capable of reading in a chart in one person's chart, it won't be exactly the same in another chart, but there are aspects that do carry over. Like if the sun and the moon were like on a new moon as an example, when they're together, well, that means that that person is really going to be outwards with their emotions in some ways, that they're going to live their life through their emotions because the moon represents the emotions. So when the sun, which is what shines, which is the ego, is right next to the moon, well, they kind of work together and they come out through that energy. So that's kind of a consistent rule. of astrology, and really it's all about learning all about these different rules and how they apply to you or to whoever client that you're reading. So it's the consistency really that I would say is the principle of like everything means something in the chart somewhere, and it's learning how to read into the meaning of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that answer it? Or
It kind of like, to be honest, it kind of like you want to break it down a little bit more. I just kind of like a little bit confused about it because
yeah, sure. So the breakdown is that there's different zodiac signs, right? There are principles. So there's Aries, there's Taurus, Gemini, Capricorn, Pisces, Libra, and all of these signs have specific signatures. And each of the planets, like the sun and the moon, also have signatures. So like the sun sign is about the ego, it's your masculine side,
right.
and the moon is your feminine side. So when you look at, like as an example, like some men, some physical masculine men might be more feminine, and that would usually because their moon is in a feminine sign, as an example, or their sun is in a feminine sign. So the feminine signs are the earth signs and the water
Hmm.
signs, and then the masculine signs are the fire signs and the air signs. So one of the principles, like in shamanism and in tantra, where like if you have feminine placements, well, you're going to be more on the accepting side, on the soft side. Whereas if you have more masculine placements, where you're going to be more of a trendsetter, or someone who's going to push the envelope on something. So those are kind of basic principles that you can get behind. Like I think you're an Aries,
Right.
right? If I remember correctly. Yeah, so that means that there's a very masculine quality about you. You're someone who's going to go out and start interviewing people on the internet, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're someone who's willing to start projects just because you have that masculine fire as your sun sign. So you're going to be active, basically.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
a little more sense.
Yeah. Now it makes sense. Right, a little
Oh,
bit. Yeah. Now it makes
cool.
sense. Explain me the concept of the horoscope. And how does it relate to astrology?
Yeah, so the horoscope is essentially, it takes a look at the ascending. And the reason it's important is because, so each month, um, well, each day, the moon can change signs, or every 2.5 days. And there's other things that can happen in a month. Whereas I think, I forget which is which, or I forget the specific timings of it, but I think Venus stays in a sign for 1 month, and I think Mars stays in a sign for a month and a half. So when you're looking at your daily horoscope, what that's doing is it's looking at what planet is going to be affecting your ascending
Mhm.
sign. So what that means is that, let's say you're a Pisces rising, your ascending sign is Pisces, and right now Saturn is in Pisces, as an example. So with Saturn being in Pisces and your ascending is Pisces, well, that means that it's going to be a time of discipline. It's going to be a time to work through things. So the horoscope is really looking at the different transits that are happening with your ascending. And the reason we use the ascending sign is because the ascending sign is what determines the houses. And the houses are the numbers that you can see around a chart when you're looking at a birth chart. And the houses are important because they each represent a side of your life. So as an example, if you're a Pisces rising and Saturn is going through Pisces, well, that means that it's affecting your first house. And your first house is the house of self. It's the house of your body. So that would mean that during the month of, let's say, March, as a Pisces, Saturn is going to be transiting your first house, which means it's time to be disciplined about your physical body. And if you're not disciplined, well, then that's when you might get hurt, or you might get sick. So the idea of the horoscope is to get you ready for what is coming up, so that you're able to take the proper action in response to the energy that's about to happen in your birth chart.
What if somebody don't, let's say, follows through that? What's what's become of them? If they're not, like you say, the um when the horoscope, yeah, I apologize.
Oh,
What
it's all
about, yeah?
good.
What if somebody don't follow through for what their sign is telling them to do?
Yes.
Is that even a possibility, or or does it automatically happens? You know?
Yeah, yeah. No, classic. Yeah, and astrology is a tone. It's not a decision.
Hmm.
So in a way, it's kind of like you're always eating ice cream, and you're gonna finish the ice cream, you know?
Right.
But the ice cream is gonna have different flavor. So if you like eating ice cream, but one time you get vanilla instead of chocolate, but you don't like vanilla, well, you still got the vanilla ice cream. So you kind of end up licking it and eating it. Now, whether you have like faces of like, oh, like this is gross and you spit it out, or if you're like, oh, okay, this is okay, like your reaction will be different based on how good you are at accepting the change. So at the end of the day, it's not that it's going to tell you what's going to happen, but it's going to tell you, hey, on this day, you're going to get vanilla ice cream and you're not going to like it. And you can choose not to eat it. But if you don't eat it, you're going to be hungry, you know? So those kinds of things. So they offer opportunities to do certain things depending on the tones that are available to you at that time.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
no
So it
choice,
doesn't
either
make
you
something
take it,
happen.
but no choice. Either you take it or you don't take it. It's just you're eating it pretty much.
If you want, yeah, exactly. And if you don't eat, well, you'll be
Right.
hungry, you know? So it's like it's always about choice, and the astrology is really good at presenting to you what choice is available and what choice is going to help energetically with what's currently going on. So as an
Okay.
example, right now, it's a very strong period to be yourself and to follow your own purpose. So right now, there's a lot of things that are happening for you as the individual because it's a very strong time to enable the individual self right now. So, and that's a general tone that everyone's going through. And that's when I just look at the chart of where the planets are. And then during a reading, what I do is I relate with what's going on in the sky with who you are, with what your original birth chart was. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Right.
Cool.
Um, what are some of the misconceptions that you get about astrology? Like from what I hear, from what me personally hear from other people when they're like, "Oh, you're into your horoscope, this and that," they always like, "No, that's just foolish and this and that." So, like for you as an astrologer, what is it that you hear the misconception about it?
Yeah, that it can predict the future. It cannot predict the future. You have choice. You have the ability to decide your own path. You have the ability to decide what happens to you or for you. Astrology is just a tool that helps you know what the weather is going to be like and what kind of person you are to go through that kind of weather. But you have the choice to stay inside, you know? So it's not, astrology isn't forceful. It doesn't tell you what you are or who you are. It gives you a perspective that can be helpful and usually aligns with how your psychology and perspective works. Yeah.
Uh, how how precise can it predict your future in astrology?
I love that follow-up question to my answer there. Yeah. Yeah,
Because I know
it's crazy.
it's not the first time I heard it. I heard it before, you know. So it's like, how is it on
Yeah,
point, or
it's
is it just?
crazy, Jose. Like it's crazy. Like when I look at, I also do a Vedic
Mhm.
astrology, which is the Indian version of astrology, which is one of the original ones. Um, and with Vedic astrology, you can look at periods of people's lives. So and the periods start exactly like, oh, someone just moved. You know, like they moved from one town to another, and they just started a new 8 year cycle, as an example. And like it's within the month of an 8 year cycle that astrology knows when the person moved. You know, so I look back at the dates and I'm like, oh, what happened to you in on June 2nd, 2020? And they're like, oh crap, I moved I moved on that day, you know, something like that. So it's, yeah, to me it blows my mind. And I was in Rishikesh in India, and I was learning from one of my masters there. And one of the exercises that I wanted to put him through was, I like my father had passed away, and I wanted to see if he could see it in the chart. So I showed him my chart at that point in time, and I'm like, what happened here? And my teacher was like, you might have got an inheritance, someone might have passed away, and both of those things were true. So it was just like, I showed him a chart of a time in my life, and he was able to pinpoint exactly what had happened, kind of thing, or close enough, because like I said earlier, astrology is about tones. It's accurate, and at the end of the day, the accuracy of the prediction, or predicting the future, depends on the awareness and skill of the astrologer. It depends on what the astrologer is able to pull from looking at a chart. So whenever I look at a chart, you have to be able to look at the whole picture. So when you look at the whole picture of the chart, that's when you can have like better or more accurate predictions at the end of the day.
Relating to that topic, I'm
Mm.
a big fan of like history and documentary, and when I was a child, I used to look at astronomy,
Yes. Yeah.
and and then with the law of what is it? Was it Einstein law, the law of relativity, stuff like that? The further you go, it's like you can see the future. When you come back, it's like everything is just in the past now.
Right.
So how is astrology related to astronomy in that sense?
Yeah. That's a great question, and that's something that a lot of people get confused. And in my path, the last 6 months has really been focused on learning astronomy, because astrology is based on the position of the planets and the moon, and how they affect us mentally and psychologically and physically. Astronomy is learning the physics of how they're moving. It's learning about where's what, when, and why, and how is it moving. So astronomy is useful because once you start understanding the patterns of the stars and the planets, you start to understand the patterns of humans, because astrology is kind of the middle ground between astronomy and psychology. So when you're looking at the astronomy of the sky and you're seeing the pattern, like as an example, Saturn has a 27-year orbit. So it takes 27 years for Saturn to go all around the chart, or 28 years. And something drastic happens to everyone around every 28, 27 years. And that's a concept called the Saturn return.
Is that the person
So,
who was born on the month of Saturn or on the year of Saturn? Would that only
no,
affect?
no, no. So that in the month of Saturn would be like December and January and February, as an example, if you want to assign that. However, no, like Saturn is going to be somewhere in your birth chart, no matter what time of the year you're born. So anyone who's born as a human and lives to 27 or 20 or 29 is going to go through a Saturn return. And what that means is it's a moment of returning back to who you are. And they're usually very difficult periods. So you've heard of the 27 Club?
No.
So Kurt Cobain. What else? What's her name
Amy
again? Amy.
Winehouse, all those
Yes.
artists, yeah, Jimi Hendrix, yeah, yes, I have heard of that. Okay, the 27 Club. I thought you meant something else, but when it comes down to a musician,
Yeah.
yes.
Exactly. So these are all people that died at 27 or killed themselves at 27. Avicii is also one of them, as an example.
Mhm.
So the reason these people go through that at that time is because of the Saturn return, where Saturn comes back, makes them realize what their life actually is, and then they can't handle the reality of what their life is, or what they know, or what they learned. So they take their life. So the Saturn return is a very difficult period, and the only reason we know about this pattern is because of astronomy. By paying attention to Saturn, looking at how Saturn moves and when Saturn moves, and from there you're able to look at the sky, and then through the study of psychology and astrology and observing humans in relation to the sky, we're able to create these patterns between each other, so that they know, so that you can kind of make predictions. Like if someone's 25 years old, you can be like, oh, in 3 years something's going to happen, so you just kind of look at the rest of the chart, and you can kind of make predictions on what can happen from there.
So you could also predict by looking at your chart, can you predict the future? Because lately, from what I hear, it's like, well, not you, but exactly, but as a professional or a person who like have a long lineage of astrology, are they able to predict in the future? Compare because lately, from what I'm hearing from you is you could tell from reading the chart, you could tell about your past. But with that same chart, can you predict? Like, will you be able to predict future telling? Like, when are you going to get married, or when are you, like when you're gonna die, or how you're gonna die, or something like that, or
Yeah.
when you're gonna hit that lottery number, or watch out at this day because you might have an accident, or you're gonna trip on something. Are you able to, our astrologer able to predict that?
You can't predict specifics, but you can predict tones. So
Right,
as an example, like I can look at an upcoming period that's coming up for me, and it's going to be, oh, well, this is going to be a challenging time for me. It's going to be a challenging emotional time that's coming up for me. And that's just in my chart.
right.
And yeah, I can see that coming. I can also see, yeah, when you're going to get married, because the seventh house is the house of marriage. And Jupiter is the planet of giving. So if Jupiter is going through your seventh house, then that would be a period where you might get married. However, if you stay at home all the time, play video games, or just go to the gym and don't talk to anyone, it doesn't matter what the tone is, because you're choosing not to drink the Kool-Aid. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, you always have choice, and whether you respond to the tones or not is up to you. So some people are going through periods where, hey, like, this is not a time to date or be meeting other people. And some people go through periods of like, wow, like, you keep swinging right now because you're in a lucky time right now. So if you want to play your luck, now's the right time. So yeah, there's definitely periods where you can be like, yeah, now's the time to take a chance, or now is not the time to take a chance. Now is a karmic time. So now is the time to kind of be more reserved and do internal work and things like that.
More
Yeah.
to 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 be internal work. You kind of broke up in the last sentence. More to be internal, to do your internal work, right? You said.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So there are some periods, like Saturn periods, as an example, are times to go inwards and do some internal work. It's not the time to start a company. You want to start a company when you're in a Jupiter transit or a Venus transit, as an example, because those are the planets of beauty typically, or the planets of bounty, of plentiful. Yeah.
What time period are we in right now, aligned with the planet?
Um, I would call this current period a period of eclipses, actually, because we had a full lunar eclipse back in October, and we have another full lunar eclipse coming up in April. And the eclipse is happening in Aries and Libra. So basically, what that means is that the axis of Libra and Aries is being activated right now by these eclipses, because eclipses are very powerful times, especially when they're aligned like the way they are. I was in New Mexico to watch the last eclipse in October, and the sun was blocked out by the moon. So I was able to stare directly at the sun with my blind eyes and see the moon, kind of the moon's shadow around the sun. It was crazy, but basically, to go back to your question, is yeah, right now it's a crazy time because it's aligning with the nodes of Aries and Libra. And what that means is that it's a very strong time to feel, to be yourself. It's the time to self actualize. It's the time to do something for you. It's the time to realize who you are in relationships and how you relate with people. And it's a very powerful time to do that. And there's a lot of energy going around with Aquarius energy, which is the energy of revolution, the energy of community. So it's all about learning how you fit into community and how you relate with people to help create community right now. And that would kind of be the period that we're in right now. And that's mine. A different astrologer might look at different planets and say, this is the period we're in. Like if I look at Saturn as an example right now, I think Saturn is in Pisces. Well, that means it's time to look at our boundaries with love, because Pisces is the sign of love and Saturn is the planet of restriction. So it's a good time right now to look at your boundaries with love, to look at where you need to restrict your love, where you need to apply more self-love to yourself rather than others, or where you need to love others more than you love yourself. It's just finding that right balance. And with Saturn being in Pisces, he's giving you the energy and the opportunity now to really learn how to have the proper boundaries or work ethic when it comes to love. And when I'm talking love, I'm talking the unconditional kind, the kind that you can have for a brother or a sister, a mom, a dad, a partner, a friend. It's love as the universal way, not in the
Universal,
part.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would be what the way that I would summarize the current period we're going through. And that's going to end mid-April. And then after that, we're going to come to another period that I haven't looked into yet because there's enough going on right now to keep us busy, you know?
You know what? I totally understand. I totally agree with you because right now, I'm going through that phase right now of self-actualization within myself. You know, what is that I want to do and stuff like that. As you know, I'm still like work, looking for a job and well, I'm still looking for work. And while I'm waiting to get good news, I'm actually like, all right, let me work on this, let me work on that, let me work on I told you about my project last time we had a conversation of the projects I'm working on because just in case if something doesn't come through, at least I could depend on the things that I worked on. So so yeah, I could definitely relate that we are going through a stage of self-realization.
And what's important right now is that you become aware of who you are, and what you provide. It's not necessarily the time to create. It's more of the time to bring it to awareness. Once March hits, end of March, April, then things are really going to hit the ground rolling. So right now, it's really just bring to awareness who you are and how you fit in, and then it's really going to pick up traction when April hits, kind of thing. So don't put too much stress on yourself for now.
Buddy, I'm ready.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I'm ready to
you're
put
always
this to work.
ready, Jose.
So
yeah, man, for sure.
I never put so much work onto my own self that it feels great, and I just can't wait for the rewards. So I know it's time consuming and it's going to take time, but it's like I can't wait for that day to come and be like, I can't believe I created this and I made this happen, because it's a good feeling. It's like making your dream come true. That's the best.
Yeah, it's time to realize what dream you can make from yourself. It's a really good time to do that, land into that, and feel into that. Yeah.
So, I know we hit this topic already. So, once again, I'm gonna ask this question. And I know you addressed it already. How do astrologers use birth chart, and what information can they get from it?
Yeah. So an astrologer uses a birth chart to look for information. And the information we're looking for is typically something that can help guide the person. When we look at a chart, we see someone's personality, we can see what their needs are, we can see what their drive is, we can see vices, we can see weaknesses, we can see sexual tendencies, we can see violent tendencies, we can see psychic gifts and abilities. We can also see sense of humor and creativity, and as well as what's important to the person. So the way we use the chart is I have multiple kinds of readings. My most popular one is definitely the introduction to astrology, which is basically kind of what this call is. But the other ones that people are really interested in is doing the shadow work. So it's seeing where you're subconsciously sabotaging yourself. Where can you see the habits that aren't serving you? And we can kind of see that in a chart. So I won't necessarily say that to every customer or every client because it all depends on where someone's at And astrologers all approach it differently. And in my case, being a Vedic astrologer, I believe in the concept of karma. So whenever we open up a chart, we're opening up the karma of the person. And what that means is we're opening up what the potential life path is. And there's a lot of responsibility on the astrologer to give guiding advice, but to not tell the person what to do or what's best or what's worse. It's really learning to just say what's on the chart, and hopefully that can help guide the person to find their own answers. The idea is like, I'm telling you what the weather is. You decide if you're putting a hat on or not. You know, so it's you come to an astrologer to know what the weather is, to know what the tone is, to know if it's a good time to start a business or a good time to commit to marriage. We can also look at the synastry between two people. So we can look at the energy, like when you're looking at an astrology chart, you're looking at an energy signature. So with someone with a sun in Aries, well, there would be an Aries signature in your chart. So as an example, if you bring me the chart of, or if you start dating someone and you're like, hey, like, how do I get along with this other person? Well, I would say, well, bring me the chart. And then we can kind of look at to see, okay, well, you're an Aries sun. What other sun would match well with you, kind of thing. So then you can look at the other chart and be like, well, as an Aries sun, you're a fire person. Does fire go well with water, as an example? Typically not. So typically an Aries person would want to avoid a watery person, but that's all dependent on the whole of the chart. Like even though like the sun sign in your case is fire, I think your moon is Scorpio and your ascending is Pisces. So what that means is that those are two water signs. So although your sun sign is fire, your moon sign and your ascending are water. So as a fire sign, you might get along with a water sign, and the water sign might get along with you because there is actually more water in your chart than fire, just based on that simple interpretation. So an astrologer can look at two different energy signatures and compare how they work together or how they would work together. And then based on the feedback of the other person, if they want, then we can kind of give advice on how to handle it based on what the energy signature is. And again, there's always personality and conditioning to consider, but the chart is just an extra tool to kind of give the base personality perspective. And from my experience, it's pretty accurate, you know, and if it isn't, well, let's look deeper, you know, but the better I've gotten as an astrologer, the easier the deeper knowledge comes out, basically. So now it comes to now I don't really have to look deeper when I'm doing readings because I'm able to pick it up quickly enough that people are like, oh, okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm like, I don't know what I just said that relates to your situation because I'm just reading the chart. And often that relates with the person really well. So it's always a miracle that I'm reading a chart and it really hits someone at a deep emotional level of self-understanding and self-actualization.
Hmm.
So that's how an astrologer would kind of use a chart at the end of the day.
Can you elaborate more about shadow work? Because
About what?
I read that. Can you elaborate a little bit more about shadow work? What is it? And how will you explain it? Because I have read through it, but I kind of understood it a little bit, but just didn't pursue it and go into a deeper understanding of it. So and how it works with astrology and stuff. So
yeah. So the way that I define shadow work is it's the subconscious ego. It's the shadow or dark side of you that you don't necessarily want to bring out or share with other people. So as an example, so someone who's, let's say I work for a big corporate company and I always want to move up the corporate ladder. Well, one of the shadows in that situation could be I have a subconscious desire for control, you know, and I just want to be in charge. I don't want to help people. I don't want to make more money. I just want to control other people. So the shadow work would be seeing in the chart that, wow, you have a need for control. How does that come out in your life? And how does that kind of affect the results you're trying to have? So someone who's trying to move up the corporate ladder, who has this huge need for control, would over control situations that might stop the person from getting potential promotions because they're not comfortable enough to trust someone else to make decisions for them, which could give them a potential for a promotion, something like that. So shadow work is bringing to light the subconscious egos of fear of being alone, fear of not being in control, fear of confrontation. And it's bringing to light those shadows that you don't want to admit to yourself, and then finding a way to integrate that so that you actually have a better satisfaction of your life and that you're seeing the actual results that you're trying to achieve. The shadow is there to kind of stop you from achieving those things through an egoic need rather than through an actual heartfelt decision from your case. So the shadow is the fear. It's the fear that's subconsciously controlling you. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Cool.
it does.
Yeah. So when I do shadow work with people, it's being like, hey, like you're an Aries sun, as an example. Well, as an Aries sun, you could be neglectful when it comes to paying attention to someone else's feelings because you're busy feeling your own feelings. Now, this might not apply to you specifically, and that's why we need the whole chart, but that's kind of a typical shadow of Aries, as an example.
Okay. How does astrology evolve over time? And how does it play in now? How does it play now in this society?
Yeah, astrology evolves in crazy ways in the same way that human society does. One of the examples would be the discovery of Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, where these are planets that we've only discovered over the last 200 years. So when we're adding these planets into the picture, we're adding aspects of observation. In other words, we can tap into our astronomy and look at Pluto as an example. I think Pluto has a cycle of 246 years. So what that means is that it takes 246 years for Pluto to go all the way around the sun. Okay? Now, what that means is that that's a cycle. That's a pattern. So once we start observing human history, we can look at the cycles of Pluto and how they relate. So as an example, the US is going through their Pluto return right now. So the US has existed for 246 years, and now they're going through their Pluto return. So what you do is you look at how were the United States born? What happened then that now that energy is going to be re-prominent? So just as an example, I don't know my history on the US or whatnot, but let's say back then there was a lot of war, a lot of fighting. So with Pluto coming back around and coming back to its original position, well, the US might go back to a lot of fighting, a lot of violence based on where Pluto was originally. And Pluto just moved into Aquarius on the Western Placidius calculation, and Aquarius is the sign of revolt. So right now, the US might be going through a lot of revolt, a lot of rebellion, a lot of changing the system. Now, Aquarius also means technology, Bitcoin, community. So it could mean that there's going to be a revolution in Bitcoin in the US or something along those lines, or a revolution in the internet, or how we relate in community. So astrology evolves as we discover new points of observation to add to the cycles of patterns that we can pay attention to. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it
Yeah.
does.
So that's how astrology naturally evolves, is by adding extra components of observation. You're able to add characteristics to the patterns that we're observing through the astronomy.
So you think, so from my understanding, it's also it's like it returns back to the history, but in different generation, but a more modern time.
Yeah, 100%. It's all about, like, an astrologer's only as good as he's gone back in the history of their own chart. So
Right.
like I know my chart like the back of my hand, kind of thing. So for me to get a reading from an astrologer is kind of a waste of time unless they have a lot of extra experience than I do, that they can see things, like I told you earlier, Like I can look at a chart right away and I can tell where their drive is and what the person's values are, you know, but there's deeper levels of being like, oh, like as an example, if your son is in the 12th house, well, then you could have father issues, you know, like that's a deeper knowledge of observation that you can only get from seeing enough charts and seeing enough patterns of what causes what. That makes sense? That answers the question?
Yeah, it does. It does. It
Cool.
does make sense. So,
Yeah.
yeah, brother. What type of services do you offer? In your What type of services do you offer for
Yeah,
those
so I
people
like,
who want to know about themselves and who want get a reading from you? Like I just we're coming to an end. And I'm very grateful for you.
likewise.
Taking your time and do this with me. So I do want to help you, get more people to follow you and, also get some reading as well too. So what type of services do you offer to people?
So like I said earlier, my most popular product would be the Introduction to Astrology reading, which is a little breakdown on how astrology works and how it relates to your chart. And then after that, yeah, we go over your sun and your moon, which is your masculine and feminine side. So we get to see how you are when you're in your feminine and in your masculine. And this again ties into the tantric aspect that you and I trained in together. So I use astrology in a very tantric way of masculine, feminine, and also with the elements. So the introduction to astrology, I have a soul alignment reading as well, which is a way to kind of find your purpose. I have a transformation package program, which is about helping people transition from one phase of their lives into another, or to start doing a shadow work session, really, or a shadow work period of going through each of your placements and looking at the shadows in your placements and seeing how are you subconsciously sabotaging yourself through needs that you don't want to accept that you have. And I have a spiritual gifts reading as well, which is to look at if you want to tap into spirit or energy, how you can do that independently through your chart, because everyone has different ways of connecting, because there's some people that get visions, some people hear voices. So it's all about looking at your chart and seeing what different abilities show up in your chart. And then I do a fun one, which is called a chart roast, which is I look at your chart, and this is a short one. It's just like a drop in, and I kind of make fun of your chart a little bit. Like if you've seen those roasts, like the Justin Bieber roast or the Charlie Sheen roast,
Right.
well, it's kind of like that kind of reading. So that one's a little shorter one, and just it's not necessarily light, but it is done in a joking way, you know. So those are kind of the main ways that people reach out to me. It's to get that underlying perspective of yeah, what's going on in them and how can they manifest that into reality at the end of the day.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, so for those who are following, I just want to say thank you for following and checking up on us. And also, I will put Emmett's information when I post this video in my Instagram page and my Facebook page. I like that you could reach directly to him, or if you want to reach out to me and ask for information, I'll be happy to pass it on. And so I really want to thank you. Any activities that you're having lately? Do you have any retreats or any activity that you're hosting you want people to follow, or if they're interested in?
Yeah. It's January, February, which is astrology reading time. So I'm pretty booked up on readings right now. So I don't have any workshops necessarily coming up. But the school that I do work for, the Turning of the Ages School, we do have an eclipse event coming up in person in April, and we do have some online events that people are welcome to join.
All right. And you also do readings online, correct?
Yeah, most readings
Yeah.
are online, like 95% of them, and they all come with a recording and a link to your chart as well as information for you to read.
All right. And what do people have to come in order to do this reading? Just make sure they know their birthday and time.
Yeah, the birthday and the birth time is the best things, the birth location as well. And if you don't have the birth time, we can do a birth chart rectification, which is to find out the time. So so there's always an option for everyone that wants to really dive into this.
Well, I
An
mean,
open
I am
heart,
very
an open heart is also
open
required.
heart,
Actually, I would definitely
open
recommend an open
mind, and
heart.
open heart.
Yeah, which is important to everything,
Yes,
right? At the end of the day,
because
yeah,
yes, because what's the point, of getting yourself like a reading, and then you're just gonna be like, yeah, no, no, and keeping denying yourself or
yeah,
being in doubt.
exactly.
Like I was in the beginning, but then later on, it's just start realizing like he has a point. He's right. It's like this guy,
You did
but
you did have a shell, my friend, that's for
and
sure. But we just tapped it at the
yeah,
right spot.
yeah, but let me tell you, it's a growth. It's a growth that we all got to go through. That we all had to open up our mind to. Like I said, it was my when I met you, it was my first yoga teacher practice. Other than that, here in the United States, it's just straight up asanas. Nothing. You don't work unless you go
Wow.
to a specialist, a yoga specialist. You are going to work with other type of practices or rituals uh, and beliefs, but lately the ones well that was before I came to Tantra, our yoga school. It was just asanas, and and it was just coming out of class and feeling good, and I felt good. I felt good. I felt great. But when I came to Tantra, I understood it was more than that. But it's but also I had a like my I think my ego was at that time was big. I had a big ego and just like shelled it, and I wanted to accept changes under my terms of what is good for me and what is not. And you can't, and that's the thing, you cannot, like, if you're going to get a reading, it's like you cannot go in there with a shell. You just got to open your mind and just let it sink in and just
Yeah, sit
do
with
with
it.
it. Just work with it.
Yeah,
Stay with it, work with
exactly.
it, and just, and make the change because the change it comes from you or from within, you
Mm.
know. So and so
Hmm.
yes, yeah,
That's
that's
it, my man. Exactly. Yeah, spot on.
so.
Spot on.
All right, buddy. I
Well,
guess there's a timer. I didn't know there was a timer here, but there's a timer saying I got 23 minutes or 22 seconds. So I thank you for having me, and I appreciate you for
for
doing
sure.
this interview with me. And um, I'll hopefully we could do a part two on this. So, all
Sounds good,
right,
Jose. Have a good rest of the day. Ciao,
you
everyone.
too. Happy Valentine. Much love, brother. You take care.
You too. Bye bye.
All right, bye.